the escalations that preceded what took place this weekend with the No Kings protest, those were intentional. We are now learning that the regime currently in power in Washington basically said that they were going to discard with their actual lists of people who should be picked up and instead just wholesale round up brown people at the local Home Depot. We have seen people immigrating ICE officers to engage in a whole host of nefarious deeds, including attempted kidnapping, robbery, and things of that nature. And we're at a time right now where it feels like, sir, what we're seeing taking place on the streets of this country as it pertains to the protests and the military might that is meeting the protest. It feels very much like a nationalized version of what people protesting during Black Lives Matter experience. And it feels like, Black Lives Matter, if we look at 2014 sort of being the year, I believe there was Mike Brown and Trayvon Martin. I think in the reverse in terms of order. At this moment, the order of their assassinations escapes me. But we saw during the rise of Black Lives Matter that Black people were saying, listen, the police serve a function. We demand too much of the police. They should not also be the mental health workers and the housing counselors and the social workers. They should do policing work, and we should take funding from our city budgets and ensure that all of the agencies that ensure that we have a safe community are going to be equitably funded. And what we're seeing right now is the result of a lot of Americans hearing that and saying no. We're perfectly content with seeing tanks on the streets when they come down to face a Black Lives Matter protest. We're perfectly content with seeing this sort of militarization. And now it feels as though the whole country is saying, wait a minute, we didn't mean against us. We thought you was going to do this against them. And there's some tensions now as it pertains to what effective policing looks like, how you have effective policing and effective agency care for housing insecure individuals, for people who are struggling with mental health. Can you talk with us about your vision for balancing public safety, which in the communities and circles I operate in, we envision community safety as something that is very much tied to public health. Talk to us about your vision for what public safety looks like in light of the other social issues and equity driven issues, or I should say, lack of equity driven issues that the communities that you would represent are facing.
It is such an important point, and just to take from where you started, I'm someone who didn't just observe what was happening in our country from afar and was detached. I went out and I protested in 2020, and I had a neon shirt with my name and title on the back, and I got pepper sprayed and arrested. I had to sue the police department. I was with then Assemblywoman Diana Richardson, now my wife, Diana Richardson Myrie.
Shout
And
her out. I love
yeah,
that woman.
come on,
Shout out to
I got to do it.
Diana.
I got to do it. And we were there to be peacemakers. We were there as community leaders, as someone responsible for working with community and law enforcement. And we were the subject of misconduct. And I still, after that experience, communicate that police officers are very much a part of our public safety ecosystem. But as you pointed out, they are not the sole proprietors and not solely responsible for our safety. There are things that we know that drive down crime, that are incentives for crime that must also be addressed. So in my public safety plan, I included a couple of things to that end. One, I want more clinicians in our subways and in our streets. I want to get people the help that they need, put them on a real path to recovery. Because what we see now, we got about 2,000 chronically mentally ill individuals in New York. Each one of those, of course, is tragic, but it's not that large a sum. But there has been mismanagement and a lack of leadership and coordination to get those individuals the help that they need. So they seek to get that help in our subways, in our streets, in our public spaces. And that's not where I think that should happen. I think most people are compassionate. They want to see them get help, but that should not be on the subway. So I have proposed something based on the clubhouse model. We have some of these across the city that are employed with people who themselves have gone through mental health challenges, who themselves are still in recovery, but who have agency to help and say, let's get you a part of this fabric. If you just need some clothes, shower, some medication, we got you. If you need longer help, we're going to have stabilization centers to get people help. Right now, we send people to Rikers, they get worse. And in the worst case scenario, they end up dying, or we send them to the emergency room where they end up cycling back out. Those two things are not working right now. So we got to have something in between. And that's part of my plan. I also want 50,000 more summer youth jobs. My very first job ever was a SYEP job. And I want 50,000 more so that we can make it universal every year. And you know this too from the work you do in the community. We got our young people applying, and tens of thousands of them end up on the waiting list because there are not enough slots. That's something within City Hall's control. We can invest in that. That to me is a public safety tool. When I talk about universal after school and after school for all, that is a public safety imperative as well. Between the hours of 3 and 6 p.m., we know that our kids are getting into things we don't want them to. It's what the data tells us. We had tragically a couple of weeks ago that young woman in the Bronx who was shot by a stray bullet in the after school hours. I want to get all of our kids into an after school program so that they can have a safe place to be, as well as all of the other empowerment that they need. And of course, if we make housing more affordable, if we have more access on our childcare, if we give people better healthcare options, that is going to help drive down crime as well. And so I've been very invested in doing both of these things. And I think I have the credibility as someone who has spoken up about the unfairness and the injustices in our criminal justice system, as someone who has been clear-eyed about police misconduct, to also say, because my constituents say it, that we need our police officers to be doing the police work, and let's take care of the rest.
Mm. We on this show really encourage people to engage with their elected officials, and we have just a minute or two left before we have to get to this point where the man cuts us off, regardless of the power of what is being communicated. But we are in a moment right now where we really try, and you know this. We have an advocacy academy program at the Center for Law and Social Justice where we're always trying to teach people how to be better advocates, but how to engage with your elected officials is not something that people naturally understand. So while we're talking more about your mayoral role, or your role, what your role would be as mayor, talk to us a little bit about some of the more effective forms of outreach that constituents have used to get your attention as an elected official, because we want to make sure that people, this is a national show, and we've always said that New York City politics impact the entire country. But we also know that the way that we learn to engage with our elected officials in New York is also instructive. Talk to us about some of the effective ways that people in your constituency have been able to reach out to you, get your attention, because we need to know what wins, what's going to be successful as it pertains to our advocacy in the streets.
All right, so I got a couple of points. So one, my current chief of staff, he DM'd me when I was running for state senate on Twitter and said, "Can I get involved? Let me, I said, okay, you want to get involved? Meet me on Franklin Avenue at 3 p.m. on Saturday. We're going to be giving out flyers." And that is how our relationship started. He has been with me ever since. That was 8 years ago almost.
Wow.
So don't underestimate the power of a DM. I know we talk about sliding in DMs in other contexts, but slide into your elected officials DM and say, "Hey, I want to get involved. I want to see how I can be helpful." People pay attention to that. I certainly do. I think it's also important, when people call and email, that is good. Try to make it as personal as possible. And what I mean by that is it is okay to do sort of a form email that you've been given by an organization and, communicate that gets logged. I think most elected officials have a count about how many people have reached out. But the ones that jump out to me is when someone just shares something personal on why this policy is important to them or why it might impact them. And I've had that from elementary school students all the way up to our older adults who have said, "This is why this is important to me. Can you reach out and talk to me about it?" And I know we are in the digital age. I understand why it is easy or more easy to communicate that way. But because most folks communicate that way, making a phone call actually is a big deal because that ends up going to the top. If I get a call from a young person, my staff is going to say, "This high school student just called me, just called the office about this particular issue." That is going to rise to the top. So please, 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 please engage, because here's the honest truth. And I know we're running on time. We get a lot of incoming from a lot of paid interest. And that's, we could talk about that. That's a whole other TED Talk. But there are a lot of lobbyists, there are a lot of organizations that get paid to talk to elected officials. And that's okay, that's fine, that's constitutional and all that. But for the folks who are not paid, who are just doing this out of an importance and impact that a policy has to them, that ends up really rising to the top. Do not underestimate your voice and the power of you reaching out.
Zellnor Myrie, New York State Senator, running for New York City Mayor. Y'all can see why this brother went from being in the top 5 to being many folks' top #1 at that debate watch party. For people who want to volunteer, donate, or connect with you further, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Please visit Zellnor.nyc. That is ZELLNOR.NYC.